Yo, what's up? Shindig here, and this is going to be a video talking about Assassination Rogue in Mythic Plus for 11.0.5. This is my attempt at a guide. I don't think I'm the most qualified person to be talking about this, but I've had a few people ask, so we're going to give it our best attempt. As you can see, I play a lot of Rogue. I do a lot of Mythic Plus. Here's my Raider IO score. But the first thing that we should get into when talking about Assassination Rogue is kind of the general order of things. So there's kind of three steps that you need to think about when you're playing Assassination. One is apply your bleeds. 2, pick a Prio target and apply your Caustic spatter. And 3 is go, which either means go into your cooldowns, or if you don't have cooldowns up, start slamming in venoms. Anyways, step 1, apply bleeds. So I pulled this off of Wowhead. There's kind of 3 things that you need to think about here when you're applying bleeds, and so also tab in game here. Let me go for a ride to the training dummies. So, big damage from stealth. As in Assassination Rogue, bleeds are a decent part of your damage profile, right? Tempest, Garrote, Rupture, etc. And when you apply from stealth, you're granted various bonuses. For example, I have Master Assassin, which increases my critical strike chance by 20%. You can also open the talent page to see here. This guy. Improved Garrote, 50% increased damage from stealth. Shroud Suffocation, another 20%. Plus I get 2 additional combo points from stealth. Indiscriminate Carnage. Garrote and Rupture apply to 2 additional nearby enemies. All of these things just compound such that when you're coming out of stealth, for a window, these effects will persist, and so you want to take advantage of these effects and apply bleeds to your targets. So, applying bleeds, all my bleeds are out. Well, not... Okay, now all my bleeds are out, so. First thing you're looking to do is apply bleeds to all the mobs in a pack. Now the reason for this, yeah, as I said, big damage from stealth. Also, it will give you energy for the pull. A lot of people that come to my chat while I'm streaming that are trying to learn Assassination Rogue will ask, oh, yo, Shindig, like, how do you maintain energy? I feel like I'm always running out of energy playing Assassination Rogue. The answer is to basically always have bleeds up. And that's mainly due to one talent, that is Venomous Wounds. You know, each time your Rupture and Garrote deal damage, you regain 8 energy back. And then if an enemy dies, with your Rupture, for like its remaining duration will grant you energy through some sort of calculation. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's a lot of fucking energy. So the idea here is if you're low on energy, start tossing out Ruptures. You can also do Garrotes. Ruptures are specifically valuable though, because again, if the enemy dies, you're not losing the full value of that Rupture. You'll get some of it back with energy. So utilize your bleeds as a means to give you energy back. Gives agility. This is the last thing here. Pretty much all Mythic Plus builds right now play Scent of Blood. So each Rupture you have out increases your agility by 4% up to a maximum of 20%. That implies that you need to have 5 Ruptures out to gain the 20% maximum agility. This is something that you're looking to do in your opener. So the nice thing with Indiscriminate Carnage is that Rupture will apply to your target plus 2 others. So I just need to use the finisher twice and it'll be applied to every single target. So I could again simulate that here. I'll apply all my Garrotes, Rupture, Rupture again, and it's already on 5 targets. I have 20 stacks Scent of Blood, increasing my agility by 20%. These are all the things you want to think about in your opener, as they gives you energy, does damage, and also gives you big main stat for when you eventually get to the go step in this order of operations. We'll quickly talk about, for your opener, a slight variation. If you're playing Serrated Bone Spike, you'll actually get a free finisher really early on, so I'll just show that real quick. So if I Garrote again, Rupture, I get a free finisher right off that. So it kind of accelerates your opener. which can be nice. And that's why you see in the infographic double ruptures. And then if not talented into serrated bone spike, you kind of have to manually generate and go from there. But otherwise, opener is the exact same. So step 2, pick a Prio target and apply Caustic. So 2 things you need to think about here. One is your hero talent, Deathstalker's Mark. At the very start of a dungeon, you will have to ambush a one mob to apply your mark. Generally, you want to pick whatever the highest health mob is in the pack, so you don't have to then move that mark later. Because it can be a little bit awkward switching marks like mid-pull. So let's say this mob has the highest health. I'm going to run an ambush. I apply my mark, and then the rest of the opener goes the same, right? Apply my ruptures, apply growths, apply everything, all my other bleeds. But I've picked out my Prio target in this pack. Now, as you go through the dungeon, what's going to happen is that when a target dies with your mark, you'll be refunded a Darkest Night proc. And this just makes it so that you don't have to open every pack with a ambush. You can instead go in and hit a 7-point envenom, and that applies your mark, which is a more efficient way of applying the mark in the first place. Now, it doesn't change like the order in which you do things. You still want to try and apply your bleeds to all the mobs in the pack first. But once you've done all that, you can hit your 7-point envenom and go from there. Just make sure, you do want to watch your Darkest Night timer though. Make sure it doesn't run out, because I gotta close this. It's like lags my game when it's open. If you're in the middle of a pull and your Darkest Night falls off, you then just don't, you lose your hero talent, which is, not the best thing in the world. So, I don't know why I put this here twice. These two, I think this is from the last slide, and I just didn't remove it. I copy pasted this text thing. So we're just gonna ignore these two. But anyways, for most common mistake. So this is another thing that has popped up in my Twitch chat when I've been streaming. Most common mistake that I would argue I've seen from Assassination rogues or people that are learning this spec is they don't apply Caustic Spatter, or their Caustic Spatter uptime is really low. Now, I haven't yet talked about that, so what is that? If you're going to a pull and you do all your normal stuff, so we'll assume this first pull of the dungeon, we want to ambush one mob to apply our Deathstalker's Mark. Lights up. We want to grow everything, rupture, get our growths out. We now have 5 ruptures out, Crimson Tempest, and I mutilate this mob to apply my Caustic. Now, every time I hit this mob, I think it's 40% of that damage gets splashed to nearby things. Yeah. 40% of your poison damage is splashed nearby enemies. And this makes up the vast majority of your damage in a Mythic Plus dungeon. Now, the prerequisites for applying Caustic is you have to have Deadly Poison up, which, if you have the poison on, it pretty much just instantly goes on every mob in a pack. And the mob has to have a rupture. So, once all your bleeds are out, you want to make sure you're maintaining your Caustic up. While in your go window, this is either slam while you're slamming your cooldowns, or you're just hitting envenoms like I am here. But this was a dungeon, a Dawnbreaker I did the other day. You can see in the overall that my highest damaging ability is Caustic Spatter, and it's by like a significant margin. Caustic Spatter should be your highest overall in basically every dungeon you do. And if that isn't the case, you maybe want to think about having uptime on Caustic Spatter. So using Mutilate, making sure that debuff is active, and then hitting off that mob, right? Because if you then tab target to hit something else, your damage is no longer splashing to other things. I'll just add here. All right, that leads to your go window. So if you don't have cooldowns after you apply all your bleeds, very simply put, you're just going to slam envenoms. Maintain your Caustic, do the mini game of playing Deathstalker, and slam envenoms. So I'll show you what that looks like. We're going to grow, rupture once, rupture again. I'm going to apply Crimson Tempest. Now, I forgot to apply my mark, so I'm just going to vanish and apply it to prevent that we have it up. Everything's up. I have Caustic up, and now we're just slamming envenoms. Phantom Knives, envenom. Phantom Knives, envenom. So my growths are falling off, and I have 3 seconds left on my Indiscriminate Carnage. I'm going to reapply some of them. Make sure Caustic stays up. use my Darkest Night, and we're just slamming Envenoms. This is the AoE rotation outside of your cooldowns, okay? Apply Caustic again. Now we're going. Some of my Ruptures are starting to fall off. My Crimson Tempest just fell off. Gotta reapply it. I'm gonna apply some of my Ruptures, because now you can see I'm starting to lose energy. Right? That's not good. If ever I'm not able to just keep spamming globals, then we're in energy deficit, and that's not a good place to be. You're gonna lose damage that way. So, anyways, this is your go window. Using Mutilate to apply Caustic Spatter. Use Fan of Knives as your builder. Pretty much in 3 or more targets, you want to exclusively use Fan of Knives. Fan, I believe, does do more damage in 2 target, but it's not consistent at giving you combo points, because it basically awards 1 plus 1 for every other mob that you crit. So it really just depends on your critical strike chance, and this early in the expansion, our crit is kind of low. So generally in 2 target, Mutilate is more consistent at giving you more comp points, and you kind of press that. But either isn't really bad. Just know that to yourself that in 3+ target, you want a Fan as a builder. Alright, so that's if no CDs, we Envenom. Now, if we have cooldowns, you do steps 1 and 2, apply your bleeds, make sure your mark's out, make sure Caustic's out, and then you go into your cooldown window. Now, your cooldown window is, you can think of it as being the exact same as your non-cooldown window. The only difference are the following. 1, you're pressing Deathmark and then Kingsbane, and then you're slamming Envenoms. So, the exact same as what we were doing before, but we just add Deathmark and Kingsbane to the start of it. And now there are some extra things you can do here to juice that up, right? So it kind of cuts out in this image, but right, if you have Pot, if you have a Trinket, you're going to use it right before you press Deathmark. Towards the latter half of your Kingsbane window, you want to Shiv and potentially Vanish. Now, I'll talk more about the Vanish later, but Shiv is good to press during your Kingsbane window. This increases nature damage done against the target by 30%. Now, it is worth noting, this only applies to the target you're hitting. So, if you Shiv a mob, like if I go in here, I'm just going to apply Caustic, and I Shiv this mob, while my Envenom will be doing more damage to this mob specifically, it will not be doing any more to the, it does not scale with Caustic. So, Shiv is really only a single target ability, but it's still good to press if there's a high health proud target mob, because, I mean, your Kingsbane will be doing a lot of damage, and it scales with that quite well. So, you're going to press Shiv in the last 8 seconds of your Kingsbane window, and the remaining globals here are kind of dependent on the situation. So, if your bleeds are this whole, from pressing Deathmark to pressing Shiv, it's going to be almost like 8 to 10 seconds, at which point some of your bleeds may start to fall off. So in this case, you see the Vanish goes out, we're pressing a couple of Garrotes, pressing a couple of Ruptures, reapplying our bleeds to the rest of the pack. I'll show like an example rotation of what that looks like. So Ambush, we're going to Garrote, apply our Garrotes everywhere. Rupture, apply Ruptures. I'm going to Crimson Tempest, Mutilate. I'm going to go into my Kingsbane window. I have Transmitter, so I got to find it. Apply my Darkest Night, and we're in. All right. I'll reapply Crimson Tempest, Shiv, reapply my Caustic, T. I vanished a bit late there. I'm going to reapply my bleeds now. Reapply Caustic. And that's kind of like the dance you're doing. I definitely didn't play that perfectly as I was trying to narrate it while I was doing it, but there's certain breakpoints that you're looking for. Shiv in the last 8 seconds of your Kingsbane window. Vanish in the last 6 for that Master Assassin buff. You also get the benefit of improved Garrote during your Deathmark, but in AoE that's like less important, right? Where your Garrote deals more damage and then Deathmark is duplicating that damage. So it's, let's say you're not playing Master Assassin, you don't really need to Vanish in your Kingsbane window, unless say you wanted to just reapply bleeds to the pack. You could do it for that, but I would generally hold. It can, well, not generally, but it can be worth thinking about holding Vanish for moments in the dungeon where, let's say, you know there's going to be a big, long chain pull, and you want to use that vanish to reapply your bleeds mid-pull. All right. That is your go window. Oh, one more. I'll add, and I'll come back to this later. This is a bit more complicated. It is a good idea to shiv, or sorry, Thistle Tea at some point during your cooldown window. Specifically an AoE pull for the 13.6% mastery you gain. So I think in that example I did earlier, I Thistle Tea towards the end of my Kingsbane. And the reason for that is, again, Kingsbane is a ramping dot. It deals more damage the more times you deal poison damage to that target. It will deal its highest amount of damage towards the end of its duration, which implies that you want to kind of really buff the end of that duration to be hitting as hard as possible. That's why we shiv in the end. That's why we vanish towards the end. That's why you can T towards the end. Stats. So this is a very loosey-goosey stat priority. Generally, primary stat is your best stat, so eye level is king. Really the only thing that's worth talking about here is that in AoE, you basically get no value from haste. Haste is kind of worthless. It increases your attack speed and energy regen, but as I talked about earlier, your bleeds give you energy. So if there's enough mobs in a pack, you should always be in an energy surplus. But in single target, like pure single target, well, that isn't the case, and then haste gets some value. So I'm going to talk about some of these things. So stat takeaways, really. Item level is king. The nice thing about Assassination, and I mean, I have a loose, like, priority here. Don't take this as, like, the holy grail, but Assassination doesn't have any bad stat. Like, at a certain amount of mastery and crit, let's say you have all of your gears mastery and crit, if you were to, like, run a sim, it would say that you need some verse gear or haste gear. So that really reinforces the fact that item level is king. If you get a piece that's just like higher item level, chances are it's probably going to be an upgrade. 2, I talked about haste, really good in single target, terrible in AoE. 3, main hand weapon damage is a bigger gain than everything. So if you look at this stat priority, if I could, I mean, maybe I should have put like weapon damage, it would actually go in front of agility. Your main hand weapon damage is like 4 times as valuable as any other stat that you have on. So if you don't already have like a large main hand, think about trying to acquire one, farm one, craft one, etc. And then the final thing though is, after all this has been said, right, even after I've shown these like stat priorities, at the end of the day, always sim your shit. Whether or not an item is an upgrade for you will depend on the gear you're wearing, the talents you're playing, the context of the pull you're trying to do, how many targets is it, how long is the pull, and you can always figure that out on raid bots. So go to raid bots, sim your stuff, and that will tell you the definitive answer better than any of the advice and guidance I can do right now. All right, talents. So let's talk about talents. There's kind of, right now, Assa Rogue has a lot of different talents you can play. We're going to ignore hero talents for now. So let's start with the class tree. In general, on your class tree, you will always play this left side here. The talents I've selected right now will never change. Okay? There might be some situations where you want to play Short Shroud, so maybe you drop Featherfoot. Maybe you like playing Unbreakable Stride, so you drop Rush Setup. But these are like non-impactful changes. They're more situational. I wouldn't stress about it. But whatever, like a lot of this is just kind of your own personal preference. But this leaves 4 points you can place in one of these 3 rows here. And here's a very basic way of how you can think of these 3 rows. This middle row here, you can think of as the single target row. So if I dump all my points into this row, I'm taking the maximum amount of single target damage. Okay, so if you're doing a dungeon and the pain point are the bosses, which is often the case in a lot of these dungeons, or maybe there's just a lot of high health mobs that need to die, this row is good for that. Okay, we have lethality. Now, we're not going to take cold blood, but you can dump 2 points into lethality. So another build is like this. This is kind of like, we'll call it like a little bit of both. Lethality is kind of, gives you a little bit of single target and a little bit of AoE. All right. So here's like an alternative you could play. Conversely, you could also go down the right side of the tree. Now, specifically picking up Subterfuge, this is like the maximum AoE option. So in a pull, having 6 extra seconds of stealth benefits, as I talked about at the start of the video, that implies Master Assassin, that implies Improved Garrote, that implies Indiscriminate Carnage. This generally gives you the most amount of AoE. You can also dump another point into having an additional Vanish charge. This is kind of more... I would say this is like a personal preference thing, right? You could put it here, you could dump it here. Having the additional Vanish, assuming you use Vanish on cooldown throughout the length of the dungeon, right? It only amounts to having 1 additional Vanish charge, but oftentimes I think the talent is better than that because you're not using Vanish on cooldown. So it could potentially give you 1, 2, maybe 3 extra uses, depending on how infrequently you press Vanish. However, largely up to you. And what you'll see if you look at like rogue logs is that all kinds of variations of these 3 trees are being played. So there isn't really a wrong answer. Just play what you like and you think makes the most sense for your playstyle, what kind of keys you're doing, so on and so forth. Moving on to the rogue tree. So in this case, similarly, I'm going to remove the talents that you are kind of like optional. So let me just run away from this dude that's making noise. So in general, pretty much every build will run this. So in this case, I removed 5 talent points. Everything you see taken, including the red highlighted ones, are played at basically almost all levels. These are, you will almost never replace these for any reason. And that leaves you 5 points you can place in a number of different things. The first one we're going to drop here, or put in, is Sanguine Blades. Now, I almost want to make this like a, I will never replace this ability, because Sanguine Blades gives you insane value in AoE. When you have enough bleeds out, such that you are in a energy surplus, Sanguine Blades converts some of that energy into damage, which actually amounts to a pretty significant number. Gives you insane AoE damage. But the reason there have been builds where Sanguine Blades isn't played, and that's because Sanguine Blades basically does not give you any single target. This is purely a like mass AoE talent. So, but because of how much damage it gives you in AoE, I would almost never recommend dropping it. So, well, that's one that is a variable choice. Next is probably Master Assassin. Specifically, if you're playing Subterfuge, these talents synergize really well because it extends your Master Assassin window by 12 seconds, which it allows you to vanish potentially earlier in your cooldown window, or just gives you more time to apply your bleeds in general. And the nice thing about having a 12-second window to apply bleeds is that you can garrote in the opener, and then 9 seconds later you can garrote again without needing to have pressed to vanish, and you still benefit from things like your Master Assassin, your Improved Garrote, your Indiscriminate Carnage, to then refresh those garrotes. And generally they work together quite well. Gives you decent AoE and decent single target, specifically in your cooldown window, but that's the main benefit of that. Next, we're going to talk about Iron Wire. If you are pugging dungeons, you should basically almost never replace this, like ever. It is like incredibly valuable for the gather in a pull. Now, if you're not pugging, you're playing with a team, maybe you have more CC coordination, you can kick things in which case you maybe could drop it in favor of a more damaging talent. But if that isn't the case, I'd recommend almost never dropping this unless you're doing like Mists of Tyrna Scythe. There are quite literally 0 pulls you will do with like multiple spam casters. I think there's only 1 before the first boss. But a lot of groups I play with nowadays will like sap one caster and kill the other, or like I will sap one and we'll kill the other. There are some other dungeons you can maybe get away with it, but I think it causes more trouble than not for not playing it. So that leaves 2 talent points. We're gonna dump them into Doomblade and Bone Spike. So these 2 talents you see here, you can think of these as pure single target talents. These very drastically increase your boss damage. Now, the reason I've picked both of them is because you have to take Doomblade to get Bone Spike. Doomblade on its own is ass. This shit is terrible. But you need it to get Bone Spike, which is good. Another benefit to playing this is that it speeds up your opener. If you remember before, or the first time I apply my Rupture in a pull, I'm refunded combo points, which basically gives me a free finisher. So this can speed up your opener, which is quite nice. So this is, one potential ability you can play. But there are two more talents we need to talk about that, of the 5 we've taken so far, you could drop really any 2 of, and take 2 other talents depending on the situation. All right, the first, I'm going to drop these 2 just for simplicity because it gives us 2 talent points. The first we need to talk about is Sudden Demise. A Sudden Demise, you can kind of think about as being similar to Sanguine Blades. This is like a mass AoE talent where the bleed damage increasing by 10% is sort of the main benefit. And this is good for keys where you're getting a lot of value out of your Crimson Tempest. So if there's a lot of very high target count pulls, which is where Crimson Tempest kind of shines, Sudden Demise will do more for your overall than otherwise if it were like a lot of smaller 2 to 3 target pulls. The effect here of targets bleeding out and like the execute doesn't do a whole lot at higher key levels, but if the keys you're doing are quite low, so the mobs are dying fairly quickly, Sudden Demise actually does a lot more work. So this depends on, I think, on the key level and how you're pulling mobs in the dungeon, about whether or not this is like a valuable talent. The final talent we need to talk about is Twist the Knife. So Envenom duration can now increase by 2 and can now overlap 2 times. Okay, now the benefit of Envenom stacking twice in AoE is that when there are enough mobs such that you can maintain bleeds and you're spamming Envenoms, you can pretty much always have 2 stacks of Envenom. This causes your Rapid Injection to double dip, so now your Envenom's effect, or Venom does 20% increased damage. It works quite well with your Caustic Spatter, right? So if your Venoms hit harder into your Caustic Spatter target, you're doing more Caustic Spatter damage. And in AoE, that can add up. Now, in single target, so if you're on a boss, Twist the Knife is really good in your cooldown window because you're spamming Envenoms, which allows you to stack up your Kingsbane a lot quicker. However, outside of your cooldowns in single target, you're not really going to benefit from Twist the Knife very much. You don't have enough energy to maintain the 2 stacking Twist the Knife, so that's sort of the utility you would use it in. Anyways, those are the kind of the different talent choices you have. Now, I've kind of yapped about talents for a while, because again, it isn't super clear what people are playing right now, and like why you should play what you're playing. But if you are newer to Assassination, you're like, I don't really know what I should be doing. As a general rule, I would suggest playing something like this. You can just play this and like never look back. Or I think actually probably do this. And you can just kind of play this and succeed in basically any key you want. The variations I talked about are very, they're not going to make a huge difference, and unless you're trying to like push keys at a fairly high level, you can play this and do well in basically any key. Moving on. Hero talents. Play Deathstalker. As I talked about before, you're going to ambush the first global of the dungeon onto a Prio target, and then use Dark Sight procs between pulls to apply mark. Right now, we'd never play Fatebound. Fatebound just does less damage, and it's also makes you less tanky, specifically because we lose Bait and Switch, which is really, really nice for Mythic Plus, specifically the magic DR on evasion. It's very, very valuable. I think there could be a world where if you're doing like very low keys, Fatebound is actually better, because if you end up flipping like specifically Tails immediately into a pull that is only lasting like 10 seconds, you'll actually get your damage out quicker with these coin flips than you would with Deathstalker, because Deathstalker takes a bit of setup. So if you're doing like very low keys, I think you could play Fatebound. But outside of that, I would just always play Deathstalker and never look back. So I'm not going to spend too much time on that one. Okay, so 2 more things I want to talk about before we end things here. And it's been a long, this fucking like huge, this video is way longer than I thought it would be. So bear with me. Pooling and downtime. So in a situation where we are really, this is only going to occur in like pure single target. Okay. So we have no mobs that we can apply our bleeds to get energy back. If you're doing a single target boss fight or whatever, we need to talk about pooling and downtime. Now, Assassination Rogue in single target, a lot of your abilities are like energy expensive. Mutilate takes 50 energy. Okay, mainly just Mutilate. Mutilate is fucking expensive. What that means is that if you're just spamming Mutilates into Envenoms, you will eventually run out of energy, which is fine, and we're going to play around that. It's important that when you're about to enter your Kingsbane window, so if Kingsbane is about to come off cooldown, think about stopping pressing abilities and pooling energy for that Kingsbane window. Because again, Kingsbane is a ramping dot that deals more damage the more poison damage you put into the thing. So the more energy you have saved up, the more attacks you can put into the mob, which gives you more chances to apply poison damage to said mob. So generally, we want to save energy for our Kingsbane window. Now, if you don't have cooldowns coming up, so there's no Kingsbane, and what are we trying to do? The goal is to try and chain Venoms and maximize Envenom uptime. If you are run out of energy, you want to stop attacking, pool to like, I don't know, roughly 200 energy and repeat. Now, there's some nuances here. For example, if you're playing Sanguine Blades, outside of your cooldowns, you actually kind of want to stay under 150 energy. Because the benefit you gain from Sanguine Blades is like less than the benefit you get from just chaining Envenoms. So instead of pulling all the way to 200, maybe you only pull to like 150. But the goal here is to try and maintain as much Envenom uptime as possible. If you're not playing Sanguine Blades, then once you like run out of energy, you could just stop attacking, pull to like 200, 230, and repeat the process of chaining Envenoms. And now, final thing we need to talk about is Thistle Tea. So, Thistle Tea, they changed in the anniversary patch to where now it will auto proc if you're below 30 energy. This happens a lot, at least for me. And it's okay. The only weird thing about it is that you're not really benefiting from the mastery buff. So having Thistle Tea up for your cooldown window, your Deathmark cooldown window in a big AoE pool is actually like pretty valuable. So in general, you want to have a Thistle Tea charge available for that circumstance. So I don't know like the exact way, the optimal way to play around it, but I don't think you want to just always spam abilities and proc it in single target, right? So if you're, what you can think about in general rule is that if you are at like, I'm not going to apply any bleeds to get rid of my energy right now. If you are below 80 energy, do not press Mutilate. Otherwise, you risk just like burning through all your T charges, and then you don't have them for windows where you could benefit from the mastery buff. That said, using your T for energy isn't necessarily like that bad of a thing to do. So if it happens, it happens. But I think the thing I would advise is just avoid excessively burning through every single T charge in single target. Final thing, more weird stuff. So I've talked about T, so I'm going to ignore that. There's 3 more things I want to, or I also talked about the vanish thing, so I'm also going to skip that part. But there's 2 more things I want to talk about. So bleed spreading, target versus unique targets. All right, so if I go into a pack and I want to apply my growths and raptures to a mob, indiscriminate carnage is smart in the sense that it will always apply bleeds to targets that don't have it, that are, as long as they're within like your immediate melee range. So if I grow it once and it applies to 3 targets, and then I grow it again, it'll apply to my main target plus the 2 others in the pack that don't have it. And the same is true for Rupture. Rupture applies to 3, and then my current target plus the 2 others that don't have it. Now in a pack of 5, that's perfect. You can just apply your bleeds to the same target, and it'll auto apply bleeds to targets that don't have it. So that makes things much simpler, so you don't have to worry about targeting mobs that don't have it. That said, in pulls of 6 or more mobs. If I use one target to apply multiple growths to and multiple ruptures to, I am losing value from those abilities, right? Because Indiscriminate Carnage has the potential to apply bleeds to 3 unique targets that don't already have bleeds. But if the target I'm hitting already has a bleed on it, then I'm losing one of those, you know, new bleed applications. So in that instance, it is good to target swap, right? Where you find a target in the pack that doesn't already have bleeds with your Indiscriminate Carnage window up. You press grow, you press rupture on this mob. It will apply then a new grow and a new rupture to a mob that doesn't already have it, plus 2 others. So you're gaining like an additional bleed by target swapping. However, the downside to this, okay? The downside to hitting one target versus tab targeting or clicking new targets to apply new bleeds has to do with your prio target, okay? If you apply your Deathstalker's Mark to a mob, and then for whatever instance, or like for whatever reason, you lose it in the pull. Let's say you're tab target through your bleeds, and all of a sudden, oh no, I can't find my Deathstalker's Mark anymore. The downtime it takes you to find that mark or that target again, you know, click on it and go into your Envenom window, depending on how long it takes, it can defeat the purpose of tab targeting and uniquely spreading your bleeds. So I would advise caution when you're targeting other things. Now there are ways around it. You can use like a mouse over macro for ruptures, for garrotes, so you don't actually have to swap off your target. You can set your target as a focus, and then you can just click back to it when you're ready to, you know, go back into your Envenom window, go back into your cooldown window. But there is some amount of trickery involved. For example, there's like, I think of the first pull in Necrotic Wake is a good example, where there's like, some tanks will pull up to like 20 mobs. If you instead just growed off and rupture off the same mobs to, so you're losing value from Indiscriminate Carnage, but you're ensuring that you don't lose your prio target in that pull. It's not the worst thing in the world to do. So, something to think about. Next thing, shiv. Do you press shiv on cooldown or not? So I touched on this briefly, but shiv, if we're not playing lightweight shiv, you can, in theory, press shiv on cooldown, and you'll always have shiv up for your Kingsbane. But you need to be a little bit careful. If for whatever reason, your shiv gets delayed, such that you're not pressing on cooldown, and then it's now no longer in sync with your Kingsbane, that is like a fairly significant DPS loss. Kingsbane and shiv go very well together, so if you randomly proc it in the middle of a pull and then you don't have it up for your Kingsbane window, that is bad. Additionally, shiv gives 0 benefit in AoE. So outside of your Kingsbane window, you're not getting a whole lot of value out of it. As such, really aside from like single target during a boss fight, I honestly wouldn't even recommend pressing shiv on cooldown. In an AoE situation, it's just like not a good global to press. Unless you have a Kingsbane target that needs to die, right? Because shiv works quite well with Kingsbane, so. I wouldn't worry about spamming this on cooldown in AoE. In single target, it is good. Just be sure that you're using it like the moment it's up off cooldown, so it doesn't fall out of sync with your Kingsbane window. If you find that you're not able to consistently do that, maybe because you're learning the spec, then I would just hold shiv for your Kingsbane every single time. But that's pretty much it. That's everything I wanted to go through. Hopefully that helped explain the spec a little bit. I will probably in the description I'll include some like imports for some of the various talent builds, and hopefully that cleared some things up. If you have any questions, drop a comment below and I'll try to get back to it as soon as I can. Like and subscribe if you found this guide helpful, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.